The bullet train from New York to DC. It always brings me back to when I first started making this commute. In 2019, I was a freshman in the most diverse Congress in history. Up to that point, it was a critical time. I'll never forget the children in our community. They were so inspired to see this new class of politicians who reflected them, navigating the halls of power. It's often said, you can't be what you can't see. And for the first time, they saw themselves. I think there was something similar with the Green New Deal. We knew that we needed to save the planet and that we had all the technology to do it, but people were scared. They said it was too big, too fast, not practical. I think that's because they just couldn't picture it yet. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with how we got here. 1977, New York. A senior scientist named James Black made a presentation about how burning fossil fuels could eventually lead to global temperatures rising 4 or 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Within 2 years, one of the world's biggest supertankers was outfitted with a state-of-the-art lab to measure CO2 in the ocean, gathering more data about global warming. Guess who was doing all of this research? ExxonMobil, the oil and gas company. Oh yeah, Exxon knew this whole time, as did our politicians. 10 years later, James Hansen, NASA's top climate scientist, told Congress he was 99% certain that global warming was happening and caused by humans. That was 1988, the year before I was even born. So did Exxon listen to the science, including their own? Did they change business models, invest in renewables? No, the opposite. They knew and they doubled down. They and others spent millions setting up a network of lobby groups and think tanks to create doubt and denial about climate change. It was an effort designed to attack and dispute the very kind of science they themselves had been doing. And it worked. Politicians went to bat for fossil fuels, and these massive corporations kept digging and mining, drilling and fracking like there was no tomorrow. America became the biggest producer and consumer of oil in the world. Fossil fuel companies made hundreds of billions, while the public paid the lion's share to clean up their disasters. We lost a generation of time we'll never get back. Entire species will never get back. Natural wonders gone forever. And in 2017, Hurricane Maria destroyed the place where my family was from, Puerto Rico. It was like a climate bomb. It took as many American lives as 9/11. And in the next year, when I was elected to Congress, the world's leading climate scientists declared another emergency. They told us that we had 12 years left to cut our emissions in half, or hundreds of millions of people would be more likely to face food and water shortages, poverty, and death. 12 years to change everything. How we got around, how we fed ourselves, how we made our stuff, how we lived and worked, everything. The only way to do it was to transform our economy, which we already knew was broken, since the vast majority of wealth was going to just a small handful of people, and most folks were falling further and further behind. It was a true turning point. Lots of people gave up. They said we were doomed. But some of us remembered that as a nation, we'd been in peril before. The Great Depression, World War II. We knew from our history how to pull together to overcome impossible odds. And at the very least, we owed it to our children to try. The wave began when Democrats took back the House in 2018, and then the Senate and the White House in 2020, and launched the decade of the Green New Deal, a flurry of legislation that kicked off our social and ecological transformation to save the planet. It was the kind of swing-for-the-fence ambition we needed. Finally, we were entertaining solutions on the scale of the crises we faced without leaving anyone behind. That included Medicare for All, the most popular social program in American history. We also introduced the federal jobs guarantee, a public option including dignified living wages for work. Funnily enough, the biggest problem in those early years was a labor shortage. We were building a national smart grid, retrofitting every building in America, putting trains like this one all across the country. We needed more workers. That group of kids from my neighborhood were right in the middle of it all, especially this one girl, Ileana. Her first job out of college was with AmeriCorps Climate, restoring wetlands and bayous in coastal Louisiana. Most of her friends were in her union, including some oil workers in transition. They took apart old pipelines and got to work planting mangroves with the same salary and benefits. Of course, when it came to healing the land, we had huge gaps in our knowledge. Luckily, indigenous communities offered generational expertise to help guide the way. Ileana got restless, tried her hand as a solar plant engineer for a while, but eventually made her career in raising the next generation as part of the Universal Child Care Initiative. As it turns out, caring for others is valuable, low-carbon work, and we started paying real money to folks like teachers, domestic workers, and home health aides. Those were years of massive change, and not all of it was good. When Hurricane Sheldon hit southern Florida, parts of Miami went underwater for the last time. But as we battled the floods, fires, and droughts, we knew how lucky we were to have started acting when we did. And we didn't just change the infrastructure, we changed how we did things. We became a society that was not only modern and wealthy, but dignified and humane too. By committing to universal rights like healthcare and meaningful work for all, we stopped being so scared of the future. We stopped being scared of each other, and we found our shared purpose. Ileana heard the call too, and in 2028, she ran for office in the first cycle of publicly funded election campaigns. And now she occupies the seat that I once held. I couldn't be more proud of her, a true child of the Green New Deal. When I think back to my first term in Congress, riding that old school Amtrak in 2019, all of this was still ahead of us. And the first big step was just closing our eyes and imagining it. We can be whatever we have the courage to see.
Okay, we're back. This video came out about 2 years ago, and I found it incredibly inspiring. We can be whatever we imagine that we can be. And I think for a lot of us, we just can't imagine, or we couldn't. Maybe now that we've broken the status quo, maybe now we can think of other things that we can be. Any comments?
It's absolutely prophetic. What she says about increasing the value of people who care for each other, caretakers, that we've realized through this pandemic how important caretakers are. The people who work in hospitals and grocery stores and so forth. The ideas are amazing. All the solutions are here. All the ideas are already here. I want to hear what other people have to say about this, but we can get there. We can get exactly there. What do our experts have to say?
I'll jump in. I think it is an absolutely incredible video. And Angela, I just completely agree. I mean, the fact that this vision, I mean, what we carry forward, we are caring about what we can see, what future vision do we want? And that, you know, that this is entirely possible, this scenario. I just wanted to comment actually on this video was great earlier this year. The conference I was referring to, Stephanie Kelton, who was Bernie Sanders' chief economic advisor for both campaigns this year and 4 years ago, opened with this as part of this conference and Sustainable Prosperity Conference as part of a, you know, a Green New Deal or a just transition, as other countries might call it. And, you know, this hits all these themes that, you know, basically that we know that there isn't, you know, economic reason we can afford this, we can do these things, and that, you know, it is going to require a lot of us, you know, really taking action everywhere we can find agency to do so, in whatever ways. I mean, organizing, you know, for that, and, you know, trying to get out the, you know, to elect progressive people all over the country, and you know, also in ways we can do this in DA. But just yeah, absolutely inspiring video.
Yes, 100%. We have a couple of questions and comments in the Q&A box. Thank you for putting your questions and comments in the Q&A box. If you have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A box. Thank you very much. Here's a question from an anonymous attendee. I love that heading. How can we fix the problem with our own house as the Democratic Party? The law firm Perkins Coie tells almost every part of the party, including DA, what is legally reasonable, while they're cover for oil companies. And there's a couple of links in there that I can't get out of there, so I'm not going to share it. But that's a very intense question. What can we do to fix our own house? We're doing it. We're talking, we are spreading the word, we're letting people know that we need progressive policies and how they're to their advantage. We have to elect more progressive candidates, because if we don't, we're going to die. Like, I don't want to be like the downer, like, oh, we're going to die. But that's what's going to happen, is that a lot of us are going to die if we have dramatic climate change. Anne, you'd like to add something?
I want to say it's not just about electing progressive candidates, which I support completely, but whoever is in power, we have the responsibility to push whoever is there. Show them that we mean business, no matter who's in charge, no matter who actually sits in the chair in the Oval Office or in Congress. We still have the power with our voices, our organization. There's a lot of good legislation out there. We have to make a lot of noise about it. Aaron spoke of a noisy spring. This is what we need. And it's not just the White House. We've got all of these congressional seats up, and these Senate seats are up. This is where we need to make the most noise, in my opinion. There are good green candidates coming up, good green legislation on the table. We can take examples from the EU and their green recovery. This is a great moment that the film spoke to, of making this decision. And as horrible as the pandemic is, this could be an amazing turning point for us. So I agree with Aaron, noisy spring.
Yes, for real. We have to be super noisy. I put the link for the video on YouTube in the chat. It's widely available, and I would recommend that you share it with your friends, share it on your social media, let people watch it. It's really great. We have a comment from Will Bacher from Luxembourg. He says, absolutely, work hard to elect Democratic electors everywhere, but never defer to them. Exactly. They work for us. We have the power, and we have to take it back. We can't just take what is given, and we have to break the cycle of people just accepting what is given. A few days ago, maybe like a couple weeks, in Corona time, every day is pretty much the same. So I'm having a lot of trouble distinguishing when things happened. I started kind of keeping a journal to be able to do that, like in the future. But I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I will vote for Joe Biden. I have never said I wouldn't. I will do everything in my power to keep Donald Trump from winning a second term. He is a terrible man, and he has to be defeated. But in the beginning, right at the beginning, it's still happening now, where Joe Biden published this Medium post. If I can find it, I'll put it out. I'll share it as a link. Maybe Kelly, you could find it. It's Kelly is an intern, a DA intern that happens to be working for the Black Caucus right now. She's awesome. It's a Medium post about Joe Biden about him, what he's offering or whatever. It was his first nod to trying to win over, I guess, Sanders supporters. So he's said he would lower the Medicare age to 60 instead of 65. And then that it was basically, as far as the school education, it was when the same plan that Obama came up to pay the 4 years, the 2 years in a community college or something like this. And somebody posted it on their Facebook, and I said it wasn't good enough. And they said to me, well, we should be grateful that they're even giving us that. And I thought, wow, you have been oppressed, because I'm not grateful. You know, if I don't have anything and you give me a penny, it's more than I had before, but it's not enough, you know? So we have to keep pushing to get what we need, because there are people in America that are suffering. It's not just that they're uncomfortable, they are actually suffering in their daily lives. And it's no longer, it never was acceptable, but it's really no longer acceptable to just stand by and watch our fellow Americans suffer needlessly. It's completely needless. Katie had a question, which we may, maybe Naomi can answer when she comes on in a few seconds. Could you compare the New Deal to the Paris Accord? So I'll leave that question up there, and we'll see if we can answer that a bit later.
I think Lane had a question.
Okay,
comment?
well, if you see it, then, okay, yeah, Lane had your hand up. Please go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you were just asking for responses to that
Yes.
video from before. And, you know, I just wanted to say, you know, when I think about what's possible, right? My granddad was a Swedish immigrant farmer in North Dakota who went to Washington and fought for farmer unions and farmers' rights and price supports and all kinds of things. Like, you know, that was a time, and I really looked to my grandparents for that inspiration, where they did things that were, you know, unthinkable, right? Social Security was unthinkable. And the things that people called FDR at the time, the names that they called him, you know, and I think that we're living through another one of those extraordinary times right now. And we can let this sort of disaster capitalism type of phenomenon come in and destroy our democracy and make, you know, horrible destruction on us. Or, you know, we can do what our grandparents did and what their parents did, and fight for what we believe in. And I just wanted to point out that nobody thought that the Fed would be pumping trillions of dollars into the economy, just printing money. Like, that was just 2 months ago. So look at the times that we're in right now. And, you know, but it's not just now. Remember that also Sunrise, when AOC took office, walked into her office and said, you're going to come with us, and we're going to sit in Nancy Pelosi's office and demand these things. So they went in. And so, you know, that's why I say I'm such a big believer in direct action. I think that just because we are, you know, party people, doesn't mean that we can't go and do something a little bit bolder. And I think that goes to what Aaron was saying about being noisy, being loud. I think that sometimes we need to break the rules a little bit. And we've seen that, you know, in the civil rights era, and you know, my old Congressman Elijah Cummings, you know, went out and was loud. And so we've got a history. And I think that we would do well to look back on those leaders who did great things in our past. I think that, you know, that's something that I've really taken in as a learning from this time, is going back and studying, you know, what people were doing to make big change in our past. Because I think that we're in a time now, unfortunately, where we may see an opportunity to do that, you know, and build a world that we can all be proud of.
I agree that we have a long history as humans, not just as Americans, but fighting for our rights. And our ancestors didn't fight all this way. They fought so that we could all be fed, comfortable, housed, warm, dry, not have to work 1,000 hours, not be under the thumb of oppressive businesses or landowners or oligarchs or authoritarians. And so we have to fight to get what we want. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we have to do with this election and every election going forward. We have to fight for what is important. Yes, as John Lewis says, make good trouble.
I would say also to connect with the film that we saw previously, just an hour or so ago, that we have to remember that we're not just consumers in this society, we're citizens in this society. And there are a lot more tools that we have as citizens than merely as consumers. So that's in connection with the film we just saw, that's something we have to remember going forward.
Yes, that's true. We have a few comments and questions in the Q&A box. From Anne, oh my gosh, Cadaneso. Thank you, Angela, for that reality check. If oppressed without rights, the solution is not to ask those running the system for permission to change, rather to create a system of inclusion. 100%, Anne, 100%. We have to take what we want. Here's a comment from Lee Mays. He or she says, he or she or they say, great video from AOC. It still seems like this video and all of us are preaching to the choir. We need videos, chats, Zoom webinars, websites, repeatable narratives that all of us on the right side of history can direct to non-believers and to Trump voters, to the Fox viewers, and the children of these audiences. So the question to the panel is exactly what Angela is saying. We have to win the election with Biden, and we have to keep the House and take over the Senate. So can we concentrate all our resources for the green movement worldwide and win the 2020 elections? Well, that is a question. I'll just make a quick answer first, and then everybody else can chime in. I think that we don't have to concentrate all of our resources per se on the green movement, because the green movement is what has to happen. It's where we're going. If we don't go there, we're going to have some problems. So we need to keep the Green New Deal in mind in everything that we do. We don't have to bring it up in every topic, but if it's in the back of your mind, then you don't suggest certain things. Certain suggestions aren't okay. Certain actions aren't okay. You can always just veto ideas, or if you're in a decision-making process or whatever, based on what you know about the Green New Deal. You don't have to make that it's the focus of everything you do in your mind, but it doesn't have to be how you act towards people who are not as, I hate to use the phrase woke as you are. Anybody else like to chime in on that?
I just like to mention that the greenness is not something separate, like a Green New Deal, a green movement. Aaron mentioned earlier that almost every plank in our Democrats Abroad platform will have some green influence in it. We had a webinar last night with 3 women climate experts who pointed out very clearly that climate is very much a women's empowerment issue as well. The green question, this climate question, colors everything else that we as a political movement do. So it's in everything we do.
Yes. Anybody else got a comment? Kent, you seem to want to make a comment.
Yeah, sure. Look, and apologies that it may foreshadow the next question a little bit, but I thought it an important point to bring up in what Lane was saying, and Angela, what you were just saying as well. What can we do as a sort of global movement? And reflecting on that and foreshadowing the next question is, what can we do as Democrats within Democrats Abroad? And, I think it really speaks to the fact that it's not like I think there's this sort of false binary that's put out there. Otherwise, you have to do it like within the party, or you have to do it outside the party. Truth is, it's all over. We have to do both, and it has to be triangulated all together. I mean, specifically for us abroad, what Lane was speaking to earlier about like Extinction Rebellion, I've been to a few myself as well, like stuff like that as well, but influencing these other ideas and these policies that are combining to an issue that is global. I mean, our conversation in our own countries affects what we're doing globally as well. I really this one that happened in Australia again. This Just Transition conference was brilliant because it not only was it sort of headlined by a very prominent U.S. economist with Stephanie Kelton, also Alexander Ocasio-Cortez's what advisor to her, also spoke to sort of the ways in which we organize across different groups. That basically that we're starting to have the conversations around that about how we change this public opinion, how we shift that as well. And I think it's really key that we put ourselves in any facet that we see, at every opportunity we can take to sort of advance this and change the mindsets, the sort of stuck mindsets that they are about that we can't have it, or that we can't change, or that that we can't demand change from those who are in power. Because I absolutely agree with what the other panels have said and what the comments have said. We have to demand that change, and that we don't take orders from the president. We influence that platform. We influence that decision all of the time in everything that we do. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We have a few questions from Facebook, or we have a question from Lori Poseidon. Love that name. From Athens. It starts with a comment, gets to the question. Good suggestions for about how to reach Democrats. What suggestions do you have for how to reach out to friends and relatives who may or may not be Democrats? We have to be careful living abroad. We may be told we don't know what's going on in the US about jobs, etc. How do you reach out to moderates without terrifying them? Can we use the assumption on parts of Europe, for example, that climate change is a given and has to be dealt with? The video is good, but AOC will be a non-starter for some. Any specific articles you can recommend that don't shout out party, i.e. won't scare moderates, but will convince them? Also, I would like to know any specifics about the Biden campaign's environmental policy, presumably still being developed. And she says, thanks for all your work from Athens. That's a kind of a complex question.
A powerful question, though.
Yeah.
It's a very, very well stated question. Difficult to answer.
Yeah, it is.
What went through my mind is as you were reading that, is moderates have children too. Moderates are in trouble too. They need to understand that this is not a blue versus red, conservative versus liberal problem. In Europe, as we know, we're in Germany, and there's not a single party in the German political system that thinks that somehow burning fossil fuels endlessly is okay. Even the most far-right conservative party in this country is going green as well.
Yes, and I actually think that there are a lot more people that are inclined to this point of view than we know. I'm not saying that there aren't like diehard conservatives. I am friends with a lot of these kind of people on Facebook, and they have some interesting thoughts. But those people will never be reached. The person that shares some crazy meme, that says what I mean, these crazy right-wing memes, they're not going to be reached. But there are people who aren't sharing the memes, but they're just like conservative adjacent. They feel like they've been told so much about Democrats and how bad we are, we're baby killers and all this other stuff. But they're not satisfied with the economy and how our life is going either. So I would say it's what I do. And I don't know if it's 100% effective or not, but it's what I do. I just share stuff, and whoever wants to read it can. I mean, you can't make people, there's no way to make people interested if they're not interested. Like there's no trick like a moderate whisperer or something like that. But maybe they'll read something and get it out of it. And I think that's one thing for me that people who are on the left need to share more information with their moderate and conservative friends and family, because they're not actually getting information about what's going on. They're watching Fox News or what's now this own network, the one that Trump loves now, because it's really just his network. Okay, time.
Lane has an interesting comment. Maybe she'd like to add her comment.
Yeah, jump on in here.
Oh, I'm sorry if you need to move on to the next guest. I suppose I just wanted to refer to your earlier comment about changing moderate opinions. Refer to some of the literature out there by George Lakoff. So don't think of an elephant and that kind of thing, and about framing arguments in a way that jives with people's worldviews. And also that going out and talking to people is the most effective thing that you can do. And there's some really great books out there right now on that topic. So do go out and have those confronting conversations, and don't just stick to your friends, but talk to people who maybe you don't normally talk to. So one of the things that we've done in, for instance, the Stop Adani campaign here in Australia, which is obviously Democrats abroad or an American campaign, but it's Australia specific. But, you know, we hold tables at farmers markets and things like that. And we go out and we talk about issues, like we're very issue focused. And, you know, when people don't see, because of course, you know, especially in the conservative movement, these issues could become conflated with identity and political identity. And so when you don't go out and present yourself as, you know, waving a blue flag, but actually talk about issues, you know, that can be an in. But again, you know, framing issues and looking for ways to make them relatable to other people's worldviews is what the literature says is effective. And that's my experience as well. Thank you.
Great. Well, we've reached